Hello everyone. We'll just wait to see if people will join in. What's up, Tony? We got Tony watching the stream today with us. So say hi to Tony, everyone, if you got the chance. We'll just wait just a few seconds to see if more people will show up. As always, feel free to ask any questions or comment on everything that's going to be discussed today. Um, Per my live stream, I think I have fixed my previous sound issues, and I did some thorough testing this week. So just feel free to hit me up if there's anything you hear, but I think we'll be good. Um, so yeah, we got Nick Bell in the chat as well. What's up, Nick? Another product specialist of ours with Line 6. All good people in the chat. So let's get started. So the topic for today I call non-traditional combinations, and it's just things sometimes that we wouldn't really think to use. For example, maybe a cab that isn't meant for guitar, so a bass cab for a guitar signal chain, or any kind of effects that wouldn't be guitar specific, things of the genre. So we'll get started with one of the first presets that I did for today. I'll just switch view to HX Edit here so you guys can see. And so just as a base, I got a pretty normal guitar rig. So it's got the Fullerton jump amp model, and we've also got the 2204 that I'm going to be switching back and forth just so we can hear the differences and what the effect is going to bring to each of them. Rest of single chain, really standard stuff. I got the 212 silver bell cabinet with a 414 condenser mic just off of the edge of the cap, and I got the 906 as well, just a bit off the edge of the cap of the speaker, so it's not too bright, especially that 906, since it's really a bright sounding mic. And we got just a dynamic plate that it isn't too wet, so we'll just hear it in a sec. So you can definitely hear it, but it's not too present in the way that the sound is going to be muddy afterwards. So for this preset, I really wanted to showcase the Ampeg Scrambler Overdrive, because it is actually one of my favorite overdrives to use, for the simple reason that it is very, pardon the buzzword, it is very transparent. So it's not going to add any kind of color of, or at least not too much of it, to the original signal chain. And I'll show you an example right now. So that's just the amp, just the Fullerton. Then we'll add that scrambler to the mix. So you can hear that it definitely gives more hair to it. It pushes the amp into more gain for sure, but it doesn't really change the bass characteristic. It doesn't get too muddy or too tight, as some overdrives tend to cut some of the lows, and it certainly doesn't give too many highs as well. So for this one, I set the drive fairly high, because since it's a bass overdrive, they don't tend to be as gainy as guitar overdrives would be in most cases. And so the gain is at 8.3 on this one. Treble is at 4.1, because it's got a pretty good range of boost in the treble frequency. So I didn't want to color the sound once again too much to where it becomes a different thing. My point was really to use this overdrive in a way that is very friendly with the amps that I'm going to be using in this signal chain. And level is at 6.3 just because it's pretty much at unity with the amp's volume, so I wasn't trying to get more volume out of it, just more gain. And what's really cool about this one is that it's got a clean blend that you can see here, which is cool because it helps you keep a lot of the pick attack and the transients from your pick strikes. So if you're looking to add a bit more gain but keep that big clarity that is often associated with cleaner sounding amps, a clean blend like this one is a really good way to go because you can kind of have best of both worlds. So yeah, it's a really a cool overdrive to use for sure. It's a secret weapon of mine in a way because we don't really typically think of using bass overdrives for guitar as well, even though they're not bass only, right? Nothing is really only for guitar or only for bass, so it's a way of playing around and using those things to our advantage. So I'll showcase another example with the second amp in the chain here, which is the 2204. I wanted to use another amp just to show how it pushes other amps in different gain settings. So the 2204 obviously would have way more gain than the Fullerton. Let's just do a quick comparison with the previous amp. So way cleaner sounding. So even though the amp is way brighter sounding and has way more gain than the Fullerton, what's fun is that the scrambler is going to work in the same way, where it's not going to color the sound too much. So let's just turn it on and see what it does. Once again, just clean, well, just the amp without the overdrive first. And then the scrambler, well, just... So once again, it really just pushes the amp in a more gainy territory. It keeps the kind of the sag characteristic of the amp, so it doesn't tighten up the sound, it doesn't muddy up the sound, it really just pushes the natural character of the amp and just adds the amount of gain that you want. So that's a really cool thing. I'll just mess with the clean blend here so you can hear examples of what I was saying for the pick attack and the transients. So if I were to use the blend all the way up, it's just the overdrive rate. Then if I put it at 0, it's amazing. So if I put it at 0, it's basically the same as just the amp itself. So let's hear it, just the amp, and then I'll turn it on. So see, it even makes it kind of cleaner sounding in a way just because the blend is completely off. So there's really no drive added to the signal. I like to keep it higher in the register because I still want to hear the gain that is added, if that makes sense. Yeah, I kind of not want to use it. I don't want to use it all the way up, so we don't hear the pick attack. So I still want a bit of the original sound, but yeah, I still want to add drive to it. So that would be the first example for today. We got Tony saying audio's great, but the guitar cuts tend to be a touch louder. Sure thing. Just give me one quick second. I'll just turn it up. Okay, I just turn it up a bit, not too much, by less than a dB, so it should have some effect, but not too much. that should be a bit better. So yeah, let's just switch to the second preset that I did for today, which is going to involve a more bass specific approach in a way. And when I say that, the first thing we see in that preset is that I'm using a guitar amp, so bear with me on this one. We're using the A30 amp because the cab that I'm going to be pairing it with is going to be the 410 Garden, which is, in my opinion, really bright sounding, but really vintage sounding as well. It reminds me of the old cabs of the 60s where the dust caps of the speakers were aluminum. It really gives it that deep and also really piercing sound in the highs that I associate with more older bands. So it's really a good complement to a vintage sounding amp at the same time. You wouldn't want to use this with a really high gain and modern sounding amp. So yeah, that's why I use the A30 with it. Let's just hear a quick sound example, but you'll see it's fairly clean. So yeah, super clean. Like the sound, it's really, if you were to use your guitar in the neck position pickup, for example, it's going to be super deep because of the size of the cab and the bass response. So if, for example, if you just do a big chord, super deep sounding, tons of bass, but not in the sense that it not too much. It doesn't really become muddy. Once again, my goal when creating presets is never to have a muddy sound to them, because if you were to use them in a live context, you would kind of lose yourself in the mix. So yeah, that's always my approach when creating presets. So for this cab, I tried to use mics that were a bit more commonly used with guitar. So on this one, both of them are the 414 condenser, and they're at different positions. They're both of them are just an inch away from the speaker, so as close as you can get. But the first one is at 4.2 inches, well, off of the exact center of the cone, and then the other one's at 3.5. As usual, my cabs will have low and high cuts. I kind of try to set them in a range that it would kind of resemble the real thing. So for this one here, we got a high cut at 6.1 and a low cut at 95. And on the second one, we got a low cut at 90 and a high cut at 4.9. So it's kind of going to meet halfway in a way. So imagine a high cut in the 5,000 hertz kind of range. So similar to an actual speaker. And at the end of that single chain, we got a regular room reverb. So nothing too wet, just it's barely there. And at the beginning of the chain, I got a compressor just because I wanted to make things sound a bit more equal, I guess. Pardon my French. But yeah, I just wanted to compress everything so everything comes out at the same volume. So let's just hear a quick example of that vintagey kind of sound. But yeah. So super clean. The highs are really nice because when you use your guitar with the neck pickup position, it's still going to pierce through. You wouldn't get lost in the mix, and that tone actually makes for a great recording clean tone. So it really comes through because of those piercing highs that I associate with the 10-inch speakers. And just as a bonus on this one, I added the Clawthorn drive, which is kind of an overdrive mixed with an octave fuzz that is meant for bass once again. So that's another way of using a bass effect on the guitar. It's going to be way different from the rest of the preset in the sense that now it was super clean, and it's going to add octave and fuzz to the signal. Let's just hear a quick sample. Once again, I'll play without the overdrive, and then I'll add it in. So super spitty in a way, super aggressive fuzz tone. If you were to use the neck pickup position because of the octave in it, you would hear the octave that's added, kind of a Jimi Hendrix kind of trick that he used back then. So let's just hear a quick example of that. So once again, without the overdrive. So you can hear the other notes kind of in the background. We tend to call those ghost notes. They kind of blend in as you bend and do chords on the higher registry of the neck. So that's another cool addition. And sometimes, well, I've never heard people say that they were using this overdrive or fuzz in that sense in their presets. So I think it's one that is fairly overlooked, and it's definitely a cool one. It's definitely usable as well. I would maybe add some more mids to it by adding an EQ block or something, but even just like it was right now, it's still plenty usable in any kind of setting. So that would be it for this preset as well. So just a quick recap. We were using the Ampeg Scrambler in the first preset, which was a cleaner, more transparent kind of overdrive that really helps push your amp's original sound without adding any color to it. Then we went with a normal guitar rig, and then we went to a guitar amp using a bass cab, like this one here, Fortin Garden. So kind of starting to get off of the beaten path. Now we're going to be just switching things around, and we'll be using the SVT amp, the Ampeg SVT amp with a guitar cab. So the point of this one is that it's a super high headroom amp, and it's fairly clean all the time. Obviously, if you add drive to it, it'll or if you put the drive at 10 like I did just now, it's still going to overdrive a bit. So let's just hear a quick example of that. So I wouldn't call it overdriven, but it's got a tiny bit of hair to it. And then I'm going through the 212 Silver Bell cabinet, which is definitely one of my favorites. It's one of the cabs that I use the most when making presets, especially if I stay in the lower gain kind of side. If I'm using higher gain amps like I did in my last stream, it's a whole nother story. But if I want to stay clean, I tend to use 112s and 212s, but the Silver Bell is a really good one. Sorry. So on this one, Once again, I'm using the 414 condenser mic, but at 5.4 inches away from the center of the speaker, so really far away. I didn't want to have too bright of a sound, especially since the SVT, the SVT's trebles at 7.4, so I didn't want to make things overly bright. And then, as usual, we got a high cut and a low cut here. I always try to use a low cut under 100 hertz, maybe 85, 90. It's a good bass point. So it cuts the low end that would mix with a bass drum or a 5-string bass, for example, so it doesn't fight for that sonic territory. And then I got the 160 ribbon at 5.5 inches away from the center of the cone. So once again, not too bright. And I got 90 hertz for the low cut and 5.8 kilohertz for the high cut. So what's cool about the SVT is that it's a really good pedal platform because of the super high headroom. My bass preset for this one, I got the Heir Apparent always on, just to give it the extra push that I need, because I feel like it's kind of not sterile sounding, but it's a bit too clean to my taste when it's off. So once again, super clean. And if I just add it to the mix, so it just adds a bit of compression. I wouldn't say it adds too much gain because it's still very far from being in the crunch territory, but it gives it that extra harmonic content that a good overdrive adds. And as for the rest of the single chain, once again, just a classic, just a room reverb, not set too wet. You barely hear it when playing, but once you do a quick staccato, you hear it a bit. So just so it doesn't sound as naked in a way. And I just push this one with normal overdrives. When I want to go into higher gain territories with the SVT, since it's a really bassy amp, I tend to use overdrives like the Horizon Drive or the Tube Screamers or overdrives like that, because they do cut a bit of low end. And once again, since the SVT is a super bassy amp, I don't want to have too much of it because I don't want to fight with the bass or the drums, and I don't want my sound to be muddy because you would kind of get lost in the mix. So if I want to push things to another gain stage, in a way, I used the Horizon Drive on this one. So that's I'm going to show you an example. So that's without, but the Heir Apparent is on because it's my always on this one. And then let's add the Horizon Drive. So it's not high gain by any means, but it's a bit over just crunch as well. We could obviously stack overdrives just to give that extra step every time. So I could lower the gain on the Horizon Drive here and just add another one, or just another overdrive like a Tube Screamer or something, and we would get all the gain stages then that you could just access at the tap of a foot switch. But for this very example for today, that's just the two kind of sonic territories that I wanted to go to. But yeah, it really shows how the SVT is a great amp, even though it was meant for bass, just because of how high the headroom is. so it can take pretty much everything that you throw in front of it, and it won't collapse, right? So that's one of the another kind of secret trick that I try to use, because those tend to pair very well with effects and overdrives when placed or before or after the amp. So we got some comments. We got AZDH saying they like the use of my wang bar. Well, thank you. I'm trying to not abuse of it too much, but it for sure is. It adds that little something when playing, especially if you're playing alone. It adds that little extra touch. So if you didn't see, because it's fairly out of my camera, I'm using my Pacifica here, trusty Pacifica 612 with the Seymour Duncan pickups. Great guitar, plays really well, sounds good as well. So really great weapon. Got Lyric Bread saying that they just tuned in. Well, welcome to the stream. SVT for guitar, yes. Well, so see, that's the kind of reactions that I want from those streams. Just my hope is just that at least one person's that is going to see the stream today and think of new ways of creating presets. So if the SVT piqued your curiosity today, that's mission accomplished for me. And yes, it is a very interesting amp choice, especially if you try to run tons of separate overdrives and effects. It's a really, really good one to have in your arsenal. So we're going to switch to my last preset for today. So small recap still. In the first one we were using the Ampeg Scrambler as a transparent sounding overdrive because it doesn't really color the sound with guitar amps. On the second one we were using a guitar amp with the 410 Garden bass cab because it's a really vintagey, clean sounding cabinet. In the third one we were using the SVT amp with a normal guitar cab, just as a high headroom pedal platform kind of amp. And for the last one for today, we're going to be using a complete bass rig for guitar. So the amp I chose is the Agua 51, which is super, super deep sounding. So that's why you'll see that the bass is at 1.5 only and that the deep switch is off, because it's really bassy, and since I'm using a guitar, I don't want too much bass. So let's just hear a couple chords. So it's really not exaggerated in the bass department, but this just for the sake of it, we'll add more bass and add the deep switch so you can hear. But so it almost sounds like I'm underwater, if that makes any sense. It's really too much bass for my tastes, and in a live context, you would fight for your place in the mix with the bass. That's for sure. So that's why the bass is super low on this one. Since it's a bass amp, they don't tend to overdrive as much as guitar amps, especially solid state ones. That's why the drive, is at 7 out of 10. And if we go down, mids are fairly high, treble is maxed out because, once again, bass amp, so you kind of want to exaggerate the treble control on this one to have a normal kind of frequency range for your guitar. And we're using this with the 8x10 SVT cab, so another super bassy sounding cabinet, but using kind of almost guitar like microphones. So I'm using the 88 dynamic on this one, fairly off-center. It's going to have low and high cuts as usual. I'm using the D6, which is kind of a bass mic, kind of a bass drum mic as well. So it's not one use only. Fairly off-center too, and low and high cuts as usual. So yeah, fairly clean sounding amp. I got an EQ block at the very beginning, cutting some of the lows under 125 hertz, just because it would get too bassy and too muddy to my taste. So that's a way of dealing with that. And we got a nice little overdrive just to push it. And what's funny is that I'm going to higher gain territories with this one, and to do so with such a bassy sounding amp, a good overdrive to use actually is the Ratatouille, because of the filter control. So I'll give you an example. So just clean. Now let's add the Ratatouille. So what's fun about this one is that because of the filter control, you can really tailor the high-end content to your taste and in a way that fits the rig, I guess. So the lower the setting, the brighter the sound, and the higher the setting, the more kind of nasal in the mids that it's going to sound. So let's just hear a quick example of this. Then go all the way up. So I kind of try to put it in a way, in a setting that's not exactly halfway, because I don't want it too bright, because the amp is fairly dark and I want something that matches it in a way. But I still want to have some highs to it so you can have good pick attacks. And I don't think if you would make someone hear this preset without telling them it's a solid state bass amp with an 8x10 as the cabinet, I don't think they would tell you it sounds like a bass rig, right? Especially with that overdrive, it just sounds like classic rock, from like 80s rock to me. It's not too bassy, it's not too bright, doesn't have too much mids. It really just sounds like a good guitar rig to me. So and then I guess you wouldn't exactly achieve those results with a guitar cab or a guitar amp, or you could, but you would need to really tinker with them. And then this was maybe 2 minutes to dial in. It's a fairly easy setup, because the 8x10 provides the bass, and then you just gotta cut some on the amp itself and boost the trebles, and you're pretty much set. And once again, if we hear the clean sound, don't think someone would tell you that it's not a guitar rig or a sound that it's not meant for guitar. So yeah, those are really fun ways to create presets, and they kind of try to make you think outside of the box, and sometimes you can get new sounds that you didn't think you need before, or you just maybe couldn't achieve with a regular guitar setup. So those are ways to just have fun with what's included in Helix, because there's so many things, so many combinations and everything. Um, and you can pretty much always get a good sound out of them if you just tinker with some of the settings. Like, for example, cutting a lot of the bass on this one and boosting the highs to achieve a kind of balanced guitar sound, and just adding EQ blocks and stuff like that to really tailor it afterwards. But yeah, those are really fun combinations, and ones that I don't always think about when creating presets. So yeah, those are fun for sure. So my hope for today, once like I was saying, is that at least one of you got something new from a new idea or a new approach to building presets, uh, by seeing the presets that I've come up with today. And yeah, maybe you'll be using the Scrambler Overdrive just as a good push, or a bass cab to achieve vintage clean sounds, and that's really just the goal of it. So thank you for watching. I believe it'll be Nick Bell next week, and probably Tony or Ross the next one, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks. Take care.